Alrighty, hello everyone. Hope you all are having a wonderful day. So today we are going to be looking at um, Charles Darwin and some of his influences. And we're also going to take a very, very brief look at artificial selection, and that's going to be what we're going to be focusing on in classes. What is artificial selection, and what kind of examples of it do we see today? So let's go ahead and get rolling with this one. So your objectives today is you all are going to explore the work of Hutton and Lyell, and you all are also going to analyze the significance of Lamarck and Malthus's ideas. So these four gentlemen here are really big influences on Darwin and what he did. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to start with James Hutton, and he was around in 1785, so well over 200 years ago. And at this time, people really did only believe the Earth was a couple of thousands of years old, based on different religion texts, based on just how long humans have been around for them to recall history. Well, James Hutton, he was a geologist, and what he did was he proposed these different rocks and mountains and valleys were all formed by different natural forces. And he proposed that these natural forces take millions of years to develop. If you want to make a mountain, if you want to form rock, if you want to form valleys, it takes millions of years. And he realized this through different things, like a valley most likely will have a river or some sort of water source running through it. And he noticed how slow erosion happens. So, putting all this together, he proposed that the Earth is actually millions of years old. Well, a little bit later in 1833, this guy Charles Lyell came around, and what he did was he wrote a book called The Principles of Geology. And in this paper, he explained how these different amazing geological features could be built up or destroyed over time by natural forces. So, again, looking at things like mountains, uh, valleys, and all of that, and saying they could be built up or they could be destroyed. It just depends what nature has planned. And he really did believe that the laws of nature today could have explained the laws of nature in the past, which makes sense. When you talk about the laws of gravity today, they're the same today as they were yesterday and the day before. So, why are the laws of nature not the same today as they were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago? And this really helped Darwin to understand an experience he had with an earthquake. Make sure you read the book um, about this experience because it really did change the way Darwin kind of saw everything. He landed on an island, essentially. He experienced an earthquake, got knocked over, looked out to the ocean, and there was a brand new piece of land that wasn't there before jutting out of the ocean. And he started to build these ideas that Lyell had. So definitely make sure you take a look in your book and read what is said there about his experience. But in case that you don't read it, I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit about what happened a little bit more in depth. So in South America, Darwin experienced an earthquake, and essentially a huge piece of land jutted out of the water after the earthquake, and there were these different sea animals flopping all around. Um, you could, kind of put yourself in that situation, even for us who know how geology works and how the earth moves, it would be a very shocking experience still. And what he noticed on the piece of land that shot out of the ocean was that there were fossils of marine life thousands of feet above the sea level. And this started to make him think that somehow the world had to have changed over time. And the world we live in today looks very, very different from what it used to. And this asked him to the question, if the world can change, can life change also? So we see how two geologists actually influenced the work of evolution on species, saying this huge Earth that we thought was a stagnant being can change. Why can't living organisms change as well? So now we come to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Okay, that's my best at trying to do a French name. He was around in 1809, and he was one of the very first scientists to recognize that living things had changed over time. And based on this, he said that all organisms have a tendency towards perfection. Now remember, this is Lamarck's idea, not Darwin's. Uh, Lamarck had some very interesting ideas, but when we look at Lamarck, many of his ideas were incorrect. This tendency toward perfection is definitely one of them. We could say we have spent many, many years developing into humans and we're still not perfect. There's still things that haunt us. There are many different species that are like that as well. It's not towards perfection. As we will learn later, it's towards the better fitness. Um, Organisms change and acquire features that acquire them to thrive in their environment. And this goes with his idea of use and disuse. And essentially, what that is organisms could alter the size or shape of an organ by using their body in new ways. So, pretty much, this is saying, the old joke about if you were stretched out your body, you'll get taller over time. He looked at giraffes and said that giraffes' necks are so long because they had to reach for the tall trees to eat. So they essentially stretched their necks. And while they stretched their necks, they actually grew longer over time. And because of what he called inheritance of acquired traits, because that change of body feature happened with the long neck, they passed their longer neck down to their offspring. And then it would be passed down to their offspring until you get modern day giraffes. So he essentially said that if we needed a new trait, we could acquire it through trying to use it over time. And we lost traits because we did not use it. So Jean-Baptiste Lamarck definitely was onto something when he looked at different species and how they changed, but he was definitely off the mark. And then finally we come to Thomas Malthus, and he was around in 1798. He was an English economist who noted that babies were being born faster than people were dying. Now, this was way back in the 1800s when he realized this, and that is still very, very true today in most countries, is where we're seeing many people being born and not as many people dying. And he essentially hypothesized that humans would eventually run out of space and food. And we see overpopulation, overcrowding, low food resources in many countries that are over-inhabited. And this isn't actually an issue that we're going to be facing in our lifetime. When you look at places like China and Japan, a lot of the Asian countries actually do have certain policies where you can only have one child because of overpopulation and how many people there are. So this is definitely a real problem that we're going to be facing in the future, and you never know, one of you all might be the one to solve the overpopulation problem. So Darwin essentially took this principle and applied it to plants and animals as well. He saw the same thing was essentially happening. And what he looked at were oysters. Now, if you know anything about oysters, they make millions and millions of eggs a year. But when you go in the ocean, you don't see a lot of oysters. They definitely do not overrun the ocean. So the question that we're going to be answering over time is going to be what causes so many of these deaths, and which ones die and why, and which ones survive. What determines that? So this is something we're going to be answering in the next couple of sections. One of the types of selections that we're definitely going to look at, like I said at the beginning of this, we are going to go into a lot of depth with artificial selection next class or in class. Because artificial selection is selective breeding of plants and animals for a desired trait. Artificial selection happens every single day. Humans have been doing artificial selection almost as long as they've been walking and talking on this earth. And Darwin actually used this artificial selection to breed many varieties of fancy pigeons. And he realized when he was doing this, natural variation was important because it essentially provided the raw material for evolution. So when you think of artificial selection, to kind of put a modern idea of what it is in your head, think about the Kentucky Derby. You always hear them talking about the parents of certain horses and what great lineage they have. That is because the breeders have selectively chose two racehorses to have a child, to get their horse. They're taking the desired traits from both of those parents and hoping that the offspring will have them. So we'll talk a little bit more about artificial selection in class. It's definitely an important concept, and we will also be watching an episode of The Cosmos over artificial selection and also natural selection and evolution in general. So please make sure you are reading. I hope you all were following along and wrote down any questions you all may have. I'm going to say that this chapter hopefully will open some of your all's eyes and get you all to really think about everything that goes on in our world. And just in case you all have not been watching these videos, this class's secret word is Valkyrie Pride. Thank you all and have a lovely, lovely night.